promised I'd make a film of my garage and my car projects, where I'm up to on those at the moment. This is the garage here. It's probably about a 2.5 car garage, I suppose. I was quite lucky to buy a house in Wellington that actually came with a decent amount of garage space. It's quite rare, especially on flat land like I've got. As I say, it's about a 2.5 car garage. Luckily I'm into small cars, so over there's the MGB, which is my everyday car, although I don't actually use it every day because work is only about 6 minutes walk in that direction. Behind the MG I've got the Riley. This is a Riley 9 Brooklands replica that I want to be building. The chassis I have is an exact copy of an original Riley Brooklands, and the Brooklands is quite a rare car. They made 100 and something of them back in the late 20s, early 30s, so there aren't too many of them around. What I have here is the replica chassis and a whole bunch of period Riley parts which I can use to hopefully build up the rest of the car. One of the problems I've got is that the chassis, when it was built, what's there is exact. It's completely correct. Unfortunately, some bits of it were missing, so there were some bits that were never completed, and I'm actually missing some brackets that are normally riveted into the chassis and provide mounting points for the engine and the shackle at the rear of the front springs, and on the driver's side the mount for the steering box. Now these brackets, it's very difficult to find out exactly what they need to be and what they look like. So obviously you can't just go and buy new Riley brackets, and there aren't too many originals around, and the problem is even if I had access to an original car, you can't really get in to photograph these brackets because when the car's together everything's in the way, you can't see them, so there's no way to get to them easily to measure them or see what they're supposed to be like. So I've actually been trying to extrapolate what they look like based on knowing what they do, and also some photos I got from the UK, very blurry photos showing sort of what they look like. And one of the things I've been doing lately is learning 3D modelling, because at work in the workshop we use it all the time, and since I built my 3D printer I've also wanted to get into CNC milling, so it's very important to know how to do the models, build the models. So I've been teaching myself how to use Fusion 360, which you can get for free and use, and using that to draw up the models and 3D print examples of them. So what I have here, this is one of the brackets here, and the bracket actually goes in here inside the chassis, and this is one of the engine mounts. So the engine has a bar that goes right through the crankcase, which is the front mount. So a bar goes straight across here. I can show you that on the engine. And so obviously the positioning of that's critical, because that sets where the engine sits in the car. And so what I've been trying to do is figure out exactly what these brackets look like. So if we unclamp this, what I have here is what I think my sort of best guess at the moment of what one of these brackets looks like. This is just plastic, obviously. I 3D printed this on my printer just to see what it would look like and see if it fits. And this tube here is where the bush and the bolt goes through for the top of the rear front spring shackle, and you can see the holes there for the engine mount. So that goes in there somewhere, but I'm not exactly sure where. So one of the things I need to find out is exactly what these brackets look like, and also exactly the positioning on the chassis. So I do have scale drawings that were taken off the car that this was copied off, but it doesn't really have exactly all the measurements on it, and I'm not sure some of these details are correct. But one thing you can note is the chassis rail here is straight from the dumb iron back, and then around here it sort of starts bending out, so I'm pretty sure the bracket will have been flat on the back. That may not be a correct assumption, but that's what I'm working on at the moment. So that can go in there, basically as far back as it can, so it's still mounted on flat. And then the engine mount sits on top of it. I can probably extrapolate from photographs more or less where it goes, but I'd like to get it fairly exact. So this is the near side mount. The offside mount, the one that goes on this side, also has to have an extra piece attached to it, which is for the steering box mount, which is this bracket here. And this, here's a steering box. You can see it's got the round boss that fits on there, and the steering column angle can be changed by rotating that. So this bracket will have to go in sort of here somewhere. And then normally these brackets would be riveted to the chassis, but I'll use high tensile bolts through here. As I say, that bracket also provides the tube, which is the where the shackle for the front of the rear spring goes, so that has to go about there somewhere. These springs, they're obviously not original Brooklyn springs because they'd be impossible to get. So these are period Riley 9 springs. I'll probably need flattening a little bit to get the car sitting at the correct height. Have lots of Riley bits to clean up. The gearbox here was rebuilt, and this actually has brand new, never used close ratio gears in it. I've got a few bits collected, so a couple of steering columns and steering boxes, various steering wheels. There's the front axle. I want to start stripping that down and cleaning that up. I've actually been cleaning up a lot of pieces because it's very quiet at work at the moment, so I've been using the sandblaster there, which is why these brackets are nice and clean. I've been sandblasting them. I sandblasted the pedal assembly as well, which is that under there. And I want to take the stub axles off, get the kingpins out, clean up all this front axle, clean up the stub axles, replace the kingpins in the bushes probably. I just need to figure out how you get these apart. It should be straightforward, although there may be a trick. On the Austin 7 there's the pin that goes through the middle there doesn't actually come out. It's like a half moon pin that you put the pin in first, and it's got a little half moon cutout, and then you put the kingpin through, and then when you tighten this up, the half moon locks the kingpin in place. But it means with the kingpin in position, you cannot remove that pin. I don't know how these Riley axles are done. It may be similar, it may just be a tapered pin, I'm not really sure. So I need to find that out before I try and take these apart, just so I can clean it up. I've got a similar problem to the missing brackets at the rear end as well. So the rear spring mounts on this. There's a tube that goes through here, and there's another shackle, so the spring actually sits up like this on a shackle. And then there's another bracket which goes where the front of the spring goes, in here somewhere. I think it's in here. And that's another sort of round bracket with a tube that comes out that the shackle sits on. So I need to find out all those details. There's various other bits of Riley around, so this is the steering wheel that I sandblasted and cleaned up. That's my old jet engine from years and years and years ago. Well, that's about, from the turn of the century actually. What else do we have? So this is the Austin, which I need to finish. So really I should finish this before I start on the Riley, but I've started cleaning up little bits and pieces on the Riley, just something to do. The Austin, the chassis is all complete, and most of the body's there, so obviously I still need to make the bonnet and the boot lid, which will fit on there. The other thing I need to make is the seat. So I've actually made the wooden seat base that gets padded, and that sits inside the metal frame that I need to make. And there'll be a bucket seat back that I'll make around here. The passenger doesn't really get a seat, they get a cushion and a swab and a sort of padded back there. I also need to make remake the floor around the pedals. And then there'll be things like, the mud guards and bits and pieces like that. These are more Riley bits that I've been cleaning up. Steering and rear axle mounting brackets. Interestingly, these sit on top of the spring, the rear spring. The axle sits through these, which is interesting because these don't actually clamp the axle tight. So the axle goes through these, but it can rotate inside these. And that's to allow for the rear axle sort of going up and down as the car goes over bumps. It's also interesting to note that you can see the axle casings there sitting on top of the chassis. That's actually how they go in the car. It's called an underslung chassis, where it goes, the axle is actually above the chassis rather than underneath it, because the car sits so low. It's actually sitting too high there. In real life, it'll be sitting lower than that. So, what else do we have? Drill press. This is the engine for the Austin 7 that I've started rebuilding. I cleaned it all up. All the aluminium's been cleaned. It looks kind of polished, it's just very clean. So I was thinking about getting it blasted, but at the moment I don't really have the money to be able to afford to do that. So I sort of did the old-fashioned way with degreaser and a lot of scrubbing. And I just use these cheap brushes. Sorry. These are like from the $2 shop. Stainless steel, one's stainless steel and one's brass. And just give everything a good scrub with those, and it actually comes up pretty well. So before I moved to Wellington, I had this modified, so the front lip's been repaired, and I've had a couple of blocks of aluminium soldered inside there, welded, sorry, inside the crankcase, and I'm going to run 2 extra long studs through here. They go down here and here, which is these. They're made out of high tensile steel, of course, and they'll run through there to help hold the block down, because otherwise the Austin block is only held to the crankcase through the top of the crankcase, and it's thin. It's just aluminium, so there's not a lot holding it on. Because I'm supercharging it, I want a bit of extra support there. The heads had new valves fitted. The block, sorry. So if I take this off, it can be a little bit tricky. So the head has been planed, and I also went through and I equalized the combustion chamber values. So the volume of all of these is now exactly the same, to as good as I could measure it anyway. To do that, I actually just used my little Dremel. This is a new one I got cheap, only about $50 or $60. It's only 2 speeds, but I find that's all you really need. And I use tungsten burrs, which are these little things. I got them locally, but you can get them from China pretty cheaply, and they work very well. They just chew through it. So the block's been fitted with bigger valves. Ian up in Auckland did that for me. So these are the bigger inlet valves, and he also started porting it for me, just tidying up the port. It's a bit hard to see, but cleaning it up, smoothing it out, and just removing any sort of little rough spots. So because of the bigger valves were fitted, you have to sort of grind out the pockets to make everything smooth. So he half did that for me, and then I moved to Wellington, so I've completed the second half. I've actually just copied what he did, tidied all these up. Boards have all been honed. So I was just starting to assemble all the valve gear. These are the tappet guides. The tappets go in here, so if I can get it. This is one of the tappets which goes inside there, and the camshaft goes through here, and so these ride up and down on top of the camshaft. And then there's a screw. So these are the I forget all the proper names of these things, but these are the cam followers. These have been ground to a different angle or a different radius on the bottom here to suit the cam I've got. And these slide in there, and the tappet is a screw that goes in the end here. And the screw screws in and out. You can see it's threaded. And there's a lock nut. And once these are in here, sitting on the cam, you adjust the length of the screw up and down, and that's what sets your valve clearances and your valve lift. Well, the valve lift's set on the camshaft, of course, but this is what lets you set the clearances. So these are all ready to go in, but I found the tappets I had, the tops of them run directly on the valves, and they wear out eventually. So I tried regrinding them, but they were a bit too far gone, so I just ended up buying new ones, and I'm waiting for those to arrive from the UK now. So if I put the head back on, which is a little bit tricky with one hand. Careful not to crush my fingers underneath it. One of the other mods I'm going to do is, this is the water takeoff that goes on there. You can see I've left out one of the core plugs that go in here, and I'm actually going to make a little plate with a tube that comes up so I can run an extra water takeoff back to this. And that's just so that you get extra cooling at the back end of the head, because otherwise the water tends to come in the block and sort of come out the front and not circulate around as well. So that's another mod I'm going to do. And that's one of the things I started 3D modeling, is the little piece that goes in here, because I can CNC machine that at work. I want to learn how to use the machines. We use them all the time. So this on the front is the supercharger drive. So this is based on a Grasshopper, one of the original supercharged Austin 7s. So this I bought from the UK. What I've done is I've had a new pulley made for the top. So this has got a V-belt drive come off the supercharger drive, and this will let you adjust the tension on the belt. It's on the correct side of the belt too, which is good. And I've got a new fan coming, and that'll mount on here. One interesting thing is this is a coil engine originally, but you actually need a magneto fan because of this drive coming off a gear inside here. This is actually going the opposite direction to on a normal coil engine. So you need a magneto fan which goes the opposite way around to a normal coil one. So the fan's correct. So here I have this is the blower and the carburetor. This is the piece of aluminium I cast. I sand cast that to make this adapter. But eventually this will mount somewhere up here. I haven't figured out exactly how I'm going to do that yet, but it'll be mounted up there. So that's the Austin engine. That's the one I'm putting together now. Which should be interesting. This engine is the Riley engine. So this is the Riley 9 engine. Apparently it was rebuilt, but it was never run, and this is years and years ago. I think it was sort of about 1995, 96, something like that. And it's actually seized up now, so it's got new pistons and things in it, and I've been squirting diesel down the bores, but it hasn't freed up yet. I haven't really done a lot on it, because I don't want to get too involved in that one until I've finished the Austin one. But this is the bar that mounts the engine that I was mentioning, where it goes straight through the crankcase. Interestingly, these are the engine mounts here. So you can see that the positioning of the brackets on the chassis is critical to get the engine in the correct place. So this is these are actually the camshafts here. So there's twin camshafts, but they're not overhead cam. They're sort of mid cam. So the cam's in here, and there's short little tappets that go up and down in here. These are the rocker boxes. If you pull that off, you can see the rockers, and you can see the valve in there. And this is actually the head in this is actually hemispherical. So this is from the late 20s. So it's a hemi head with short push rods operating the cams. So this I'll work on. What else have I got? I've got a few other bits and pieces around, tools. These were some little lights I got on Trade Me just recently for $40, which was quite good. I don't know if they'll go on the Austin or the Riley, but they're sort of correct for either. Here I have small slip rollers. Even though I haven't done anything on the car, I've been buying bits and pieces for it. So one of the other things I bought was a bead roller. So I'm going to use that when I do things like the seat and the petrol tank in the Austin. These are not expensive. They're made out of thick steel, but they still flex. So I ended up actually, it's a bit hard to see, welding reinforcing bar to the back of it to stiffen it all up. And that lets you do things like over here, roll these beads into a bit of metal, which strengthens it, gives it strength. There's more Austin parts, Riley parts, Austin parts. Down there are the original guards and the radiator for the Riley. This piece of aluminium is one I did on the English wheel, so I was just practicing, just rolling curve into the panel. So that's how I managed to put curve into the panels on the Austin. So I'm going to have to, when I make the panel that covers the boot, make the boot lid, that'll have shape rolled into it like that. Not as much as that, but shape. So the English wheel's over here. So the wheel's actually under there. It's all wrapped up so it doesn't rust. I think that's about it for in here. I've got my little lathe. So it's a fairly good setup. I'm quite lucky to actually have this much space. Like I say, garages are kind of rare in Wellington. So now I just have to start actually using it and making use of the space and the tools I've got and actually start making some progress on these things. So I'll stop this here and we'll just have a quick look at the 3D modelling I've been doing in Sign. This is just an example of the 3D modelling I've been doing. So I've been using the software Fusion 360 to let you model things. It's a bit hard. I've got it running on my laptop. This is actually this little water branch takeoff piece. You can see I sort of modelled it all up and then actually 3D printed it in plastic to see what the part will look like. I guess that's what they call rapid prototyping. This is the printer I built, 3D printer with the filament that gets fed up down to the extruder and it sort of moves backwards and forwards and prints out these parts. To show a bit easier how the software works on the other computer, but basically it lets you draw up pieces and then sort of manipulate them. You can sort of rotate around, oops, and shift them around in 3D space. You sort of model up the pieces. This is actually something else I'm modelling out. This isn't really car stuff. This is for something else. But you can see over here so this is the bracket I modelled up for the Riley. I'm not sure, like I say, I'm not sure exactly what it needs to look like. I'm kind of extrapolating a bit here, trying to figure it out, but you can you get some idea of how it works. Like I say, there aren't any plans or even any really good photographs of this, so let's see. This is one of the photos I have, but you know, it's obviously not very high resolution, so it's quite hard to see. It almost looks like there's another extra piece sort of down the bottom here. I'm not really sure what's going on there. So this is kind of the thing I have to work on. I also have sort of drawings. These are some of the drawings I've got that were made off the car. And these give me sort of some of the dimensions, but not very accurately. So it's kind of hard to... I can get a sort of vague idea of this. So what I actually really need to know is exactly what these brackets look like, what they're made out of, how they're made, and exactly where they go on the car. So, you know, looking at the dimensions, sort of the length, what the mounting point is in here. So that's what I'm trying to figure out at the moment. That's pretty much it. This was the other piece that I modelled up. This was what was on the other computer, so you can sort of see you can make some fairly complicated things. This is for another invention that isn't quite finished yet, and I can sort of show what this does. That's a completely different project altogether.